Hello and welcome to this demo of XtremIO 4.0 integrating with VMware Horizon and App Volume. So what we see here is a single 10 terabyte XBreak that I've provisioned 2,500 VDI machines. Those are all link clones, and you see very little capacity to start with, but still you can see that despite the fact that we're using link clone, we do have some data reduction savings. So if you go back to the vCenter, we can actually see all of these VMs are currently up and running, and those are these VMs here. So we have roughly 2,500 of them. As I said, they are all up and running. And if we go back to the data store view, we will also see that we have some other data store known as AppStack. AppStack basically contains a new VMware technology known as App Volume, which means that the Office 2013, which is an example application that I installed, is actually going to be stored on these specific folders and data stores. That means that the VDI VMs do not actually have Office installed inside of them, and instead I'm going to use App Volume to attach the Office application to them. In my example, I'm using Office, but as I mentioned, you can pretty much AppStack any other application that is out there as well. What does it give you? Well, it really gives you to enjoy both worlds of what VMware known as VDI 3.0. It gives you the ability to run with link clones, but still be able to attach application to specific users or specific computer accounts. So let's see how it looks behind the scene. Here I have a VDI link clone VM. And if I go back to its settings, you will see that it only has two drives. This is the drive where it's reading its master image from, and this is where it stored the link clone temporary space. So if I will now go back and log into this VM with just a generic user, you will see that this user doesn't actually see too much. There you go. Let's connect with a local administrator user. Log in. It's going to take a couple of seconds for App Volume to attach the Office to this specific VM, and that's it. So the first thing to note is if we actually go to the VM edit setting, we will see a new drive that is attached to it, this one. So this is our drive 3, and this is actually the disk that contains the Office 2013 VMDK AppStack volume. And if we go back inside the VM and try to run Word, we will actually see that Word is now attached and up and running from this VM. We can double verify it by just going to the control panel and add remove programs and see that Microsoft Office appears as if it's installed locally. Again, this is a tremendous value for our customers. The ability to always use the same master image and just attach application as you go is a tremendous value out there for VDI administrators. Now let's try to run a real load on these VMs, and we're going to use login VSI to do so. So the workflow that we're going to use is actually login VSI will now log on to each and every one of these VMs, which will mean that Office will be attached to them, and then it will start running its load on this VM. Okay, so now it's time to run the actual test with login VSI. So as you can see, it's already installed here. And what I'm going to do is run the knowledge worker, which is a heavy worker compared to the medium worker, which used to be the de facto workload with login VSI. It's actually heavier on the CPUs of the ES6 servers and also a bit higher on the storage. And I'm going to launch roughly 2,500 VDI VMs, spanning over 45 minutes, which is what login VSI recommend you to do as part of your logging morning storm, which means that over 45 minutes users will actually start working during the morning hours. So let's start the test. I'm just going to start it now. Give the test a name. Login VSI will now invoke the launchers, which will then in return connect to those VDI VMs, which we're going to examine in a second. And we're also going to examine the storage once the test is over to see what was the load on the storage array, what was the latency that was observed, and eventually we will also see and examine the login VSI indexing report, which gives us the report around the test itself, whether we passed it or not, and under what score. So login VSI is now starting to log in into these VMs. So let's start to log into the first one and see what it's actually doing to the VMs themselves. Login VSI really simulating a real user behavior. So it will launch Microsoft Office, try to compose Word documents, read emails, browse the internet, zip files, watch some movie trailers, pretty much everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, apart maybe watching the movie trailers. So as you can see, it's already logging into the first one. It's trying to read a notepad file, zip them to a PDF, print them to a PDF, some very typical user activities that we do. As you can see now, it's opening Microsoft Outlook, browsing the internet, and it's really going to do this across all the 2,500 VMs. What will be different is the random pattern. So not all of them will read Outlook at the same time, while not all of them will browse the internet at the same time, just like real workers. So at this stage, I'm just going to pause the test and, pause the recording. I'm just going to wait for the recording to finish before we go back and see what was the load that we observed. We can see that the user is also working with Microsoft Excel as well. Let's see the progress. We are halfway there for sure. As you can see, more than half of the users already been logged in, and more than half have actually been also logged in. So roughly about 20 more minutes. And we can also take a look at the storage and see what we've seen so far. So obviously, as you can see, we see more and more IOPS, so the IOPS are climbing. And if we actually zoom in, we can also see the latency for what we observe so far, which as you can see is super low. If we just zoom in, we can see that we're roughly above or as in 1 millisecond latency at peaks, which is really, really good, especially considering the fact that it is a super heavy workload that Login VSI is now launching. So next time I resume will be toward the end of the test. Okay, almost all the VMs have been logged in. As you can see, this specific VM is now trying to compose a Word file. If we go back to the analyzer, you can see that we are almost 3 minutes before the test finish, and more than 2,338 VMs have already been logged in. So let's just wait for the test to end. Also, if we observe the app volume console, it's very useful. It shows you how many users are currently logged in, how many computers are already logged in, how many AppStack applications are attached to the computers. Very, very useful for many cases. Licensing, for example, is one of them. Licensing compliancy. You can actually see how many users are currently using Office, something that you may have difficulties to viewing if you're just using persistent desktops. Okay, the test is now almost finished. We are a couple of minutes before Login VSI will actually start logging off the users. So let's actually examine the storage utilization during the test itself. So as you can see, you can pretty much guess that this was the peak, the hill, as we call it, that the Login VSI users created when more and more users have been logged in. And if we actually zoomed in to this time frame, we can see that the peak of the apps was around 40K, and let's now observe the latency. So apart from this very, very small burst, which we can actually zoom into it, which we'll see that was 4 millisecond latency for like 10 seconds. If we zoom back out again, let's take a look even at the higher peak, which were pretty much the norm. We can see that at its highest peak, the latency was around 0.4 millisecond latency, but really it would be fair to say that for the duration of the test, the latency was around 1 millisecond latency, which is awesome, especially considering that app volume does add additional latency due to its nature itself. So that was the test itself. Now let's wait for Login VSI to finish with the testing so we can actually observe the Login VSI indexing score. So the test is actually already done, but what Login VSI will now do is start to log off all of these users, which we need to in order to assess the Login VSI indexing report. Okay, so let's now run the Login VSI analyzer to view our report. Analyzer, we select the test. That's the test that we ran. Open. Take a couple of seconds. Yeah, we want to override cache. So that's a login VSI indexing report, and as you can see, the latency, the VSI index average was very good, below 1 millisecond latency, which is what you expect. So thank you very much for watching.